In this video, we're going to be going over Chapter 11 in the book, Human Resource Management, and looking at the people aspect as far as businesses are concerned. You can see the things we're going to be talking about. Okay, working with people is really what HR management is really all about. We'll be looking at some of the laws, thinking about our human resource needs, recruitment, selection, and then training and development. Now that will be the first video. We're actually doing this video in two parts. That will be the first video. The second video will be talking about performance appraisals, compensation, scheduling, and then thinking about what do we need to do as far as moving employees in or out. So those are some of the key things we'll be talking about. Now, first of all, human resource management is really all about the people aspect. First of all, it's figuring out what it is that the organization needs as far as people are concerned, and then find them, bring them in, get them trained, keep them motivated, do the evaluation, compensate them, and then at times let them go also. And so HR has really become more of a business partner with the business. It used to be thought of as just personnel. Really is a business partner now with the organization. And the reason is because the organization has various goals that need to be achieved. And you can see all of the things that human resource management actually gets into, and some of the things that are necessary. When you think about human resource management and you're going to go in and try to work someplace, there's some things to think about. First of all, they're going to check references with people that they know. In other words, they may know somebody from an organization that you are leaving. They may call that person to find out more about you. They're not always going to help you in the way that you hope. And the reason is because human resource management has to balance the needs of both the people and the organization. Better hope they like you, okay? You may end up on the layoff list if you don't. And this thing right here is key. Be careful what you post on Facebook because it can get you fired. A lot of people think that they have freedom of speech. Well, to a point. The thing is, there may be consequences for you exercising that freedom. As a story, my daughter had an ex who was suing her. And because of some of the things that he had posted on Facebook, the suit was dropped like a hot potato. So be careful about what it is that you post on Facebook because it can come back to bite you. When we're talking about people, people are the primary resource that the organizations have. And the reason is because a company does absolutely nothing without people. I'm a firm believer there's really no such thing as, quote unquote, the organization or the company. It's all people. Companies do nothing. People do everything. So it's really important for all managers in organizations understand human resources and some of the things that go along with it. We do have a lot of challenges today as far as human resources are concerned. We have various generations in the workforce. We do have shortages of workers in some of the areas that are really needed. We are expanding globally. And one of the issues is we have people here in the United States who are actually competing with almost slave labor overseas. And one of the things we're also dealing with is a decreased sense of employee loyalty. Ever since companies started doing downsizing some years back, companies showed that they weren't necessarily dedicated to people. Now what they will do is hope that they build you and develop you to the point where you can be successful no matter where you're at, whether it's with that organization or with another organization. So a lot of people have lost kind of that loyalty to companies. One of the important things to understand about human resource management are the legal aspects. First of all, one of the biggies was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title VII prohibited any kind of discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin. And so these are some of the areas in here that says, okay, you cannot make a choice to hire someone or to fire someone based on these areas. The next biggie was the Equal Employment Opportunity Act of 1972. All right. What it did was it gave guidelines that showed the acceptable employer conduct and some of the things that were necessary there. It also said that there were certain record-keeping procedures that you needed to uphold as far as an organization is concerned. It also brought in the idea of affirmative action. Now, affirmative action is not setting up quotas. What it is going other places to try to find the talent that may be necessary. So, for example, you may be looking for an engineer, and in the organization, you find that when you start looking at the representation of minorities, you have a shortage of minority engineers. So what you do is you expand where it is that you might look for some of those engineers. So it does not mean that you have to fire or hire a minority. What it says is you have to do more to try to find those minorities to fill those positions. And then it talks about reverse discrimination. In other words, discriminating against a majority for some reason or another. Then you have the Civil Rights Act of '91. Okay, what it does is give victims the right to a jury trial. You have the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, OFCCP. If you are going to do business with the federal government, you have to abide by the OFCCP and the things that they say as far as affirmative action laws and non-discrimination. In 1990, you had the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. Basically what that's saying is you cannot discriminate against someone based on a disability, and reasonable accommodations are required. Now that doesn't mean if somebody is in a wheelchair and they want to have an elevator that takes them right to their office, well, that's not necessarily reasonable. Reasonable accommodation would be making sure that they have access to all of those things that would be necessary for them to be able to do the job with their disability. Then you had the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, which basically says you cannot choose to hire, fire, or compensate someone based on their age if they are over 40. If they are under 40, not a problem. Now, a lot of this legislation has had an effect where all managers need to understand the law and act within it. And the thing is, the laws do change fairly regularly, so you have to stay on top of what's going on within the legal aspect when it comes to hiring, firing, etc. When you think about figuring out what it is that companies need as far as their people are concerned, you have to think about the human resource planning process, where what you do is you put together an inventory of what it is that you have and what it is that you need. For those things where you have needs, you prepare what's called a job analysis. You then assess the future demand and the labor supply, in other words, locally, nationally, whatever is necessary, and then put together a strategic plan. Now, that strategic plan is important because that is where HR really does come into play and is a partner to the overall business. Now, you start with that job analysis. A job analysis is basically figuring out what needs to be done in a particular job. From there, you put together your job description. In other words, it describes the responsibilities, duties, and the type of work that's going to be done in a particular job. From that, you put together your job specifications. In other words, what are the qualifications necessary to do this job right here that you have in that description? With that done, you can start recruiting. In other words, trying to find the right people to fill those slots that you have these openings for. And you're going to use both internal and external sources to find them. There's all kinds of external sources that human resource managers use to try to find the right people. In other words, employment agencies, consultants, going to colleges and universities and looking for the graduates, union organizations, temporary help services. There's all kinds of places outside of the organization that human resources will look for the right people. They will also use internal sources. So, for example, you may have more promotions. Or what about employee recommendations? In other words, hey, we have a particular opening. Anybody know someone who would be good for that opening? Those sometimes are some of the best hires that you can possibly get. There's all kinds of places where human resources looks for the right people. In the selection process, what you're doing is you are gathering all of the different people who may want to be a part of that organization or want that job. And you have to figure out who's going to be the best one for that. What you do is you go ahead and have everybody complete an application form. Now, the application form is a legal document. If you lie on an application, you can be let go. They do the interviewing. In other words, trying to figure out, okay, is this the right person? What kind of experience do they have in things? There may possibly be some employment tests that go along with the interviews and looking at, is this person the right one? For example, let's say that you are hiring for someone who's going to be doing business intelligence analysis, and they need to understand some of the programming languages that go with that. Well, you can give them a test to see if they understand those languages, such as Python or R or something along those lines. May conduct some background investigations. In other words, they might check some references. They may also check your credit, depending upon the type of job that you're looking for. They may ask you to do a physical exam, possibly a drug test. Now, here's a little tip for you. If they ask you to do a drug test, chances are they're going to hire you. You're going to get yourself an offer. The reason for that is because there have been lawsuits where asking for a drug test before they've decided to hire someone has been found to be discriminatory. There's a lot of mistakes that people make on their applications. Okay, maybe they don't meet the minimum requirements, don't follow directions. I have seen some of the worst applications and resumes where people didn't proofread what it was that they were doing. Maybe they don't take time to personalize the cover letter or the resume. Folks, every time you send out a resume, it should be tailored to the position and the company that you're applying for. And maybe they just copy and paste the job description in their cover letter. These are some mistakes that a lot of people make when they're applying for jobs. Be careful of those. You may also, as a human resource management person, be looking for contingent workers or temporary workers. There are a lot of people out there who are working as temps for several reasons. One may be they can't find a full-time job, so what they're doing is they're working as a temp through a temp agency or something along those lines. There are some people who want to work for a particular organization, and the organization hires them as a contingent person, a contract person, to test them out, to see if that's somebody that they want to hire full-time. Another reason is there are some people who just prefer to be nothing but contractors, where they will work for certain organizations for a certain length of time, and they have the freedom to change whenever they want. There's all kinds of reasons why companies use contract workers or contingent or temporary workers. Maybe they have peaks of demand during the year. Maybe there's some uncertain economic times. In other words, maybe the business is sinking in certain areas and they still have a need for people doing certain things. A lot of times, they're trying to save on employee benefits. Employee benefits are very expensive, and so they'll hire contractors where they don't have to pay those benefits. There's a lot of temp workers on the rise, okay? The average amount of temporary workers employed by agencies is around 3 million a week. So there's a lot of folks who are working in temp jobs. Once you get them on board, you have to do the training and development. You have to make sure that they understand what it is that they're supposed to do and they have the tools to do it. Now you hear the terms training and development. Training is short term. In other words, you're focused on the current job. That is the supervisor's responsibility, to make sure that you know how to do your current job. Development is focused on the longer term. In other words, what are you doing for the future? That is your responsibility, to make sure that you are doing the things that are important for your long-term development. There's several steps when it comes to T&D. All right, you need to do what's called a needs assessment. In other words, what kind of needs are there in the organization? What are the skills that are necessary? What do the people need to be able to do? You then design your training to meet those needs. You go ahead and do the execution, you put people through the training, and then you evaluate the effectiveness of that training. I'm sure a lot of you have been through various training activities in your jobs, okay? Going through orientation when you're first hired, and OJT, on-the-job training. Maybe you had apprenticeships. Off-the-job training is where you are actually doing some work in maybe a volunteer situation, and those are skills that you're bringing into the organization that could be very beneficial. We're doing online training right now, okay, as far as some of the education that we're doing. So there's a lot of different training and development activities that you can use. Others, which are really key, are networking and finding a mentor. Networking is where you start developing relationships with people in the organization, not just in your department, in other departments, in other parts of the organization, learning more about the business, developing those relationships. Having a mentor is really important, where what the mentor does is the mentor helps you learn to grow. It helps you in your long-term development as far as your skills, as far as some of the things that you know about, how you do things like this. This is the first part of the video. We're going to go ahead and shut this down. In the next part of the video, we're going to be continuing on with the information in the chapter.